Hello and welcome again, guys, to another episode of OnReviewCast. And we're back here again. Today, we're going to be taking a look at House of the Dragons, Episode 3, on review.
HBO series, House of the Dragons, Season 1, Episode 3.
So, Episode 3, just like every other episode, guys, we're going to have our synopsis courtesy of fandom. And the episode 3 is entitled Second of His Name and was written by Gabe Fonseca and Ryan Kondo. And the premiere date was September 4th, 2022. Synopsis. Daemon and the Sea Snake battle the Crab Feeder. The realm celebrates Aegon's second name day, and Rhaenyra faces the prospects of marriage. Yeah, so this one was a bit jarring. I kind of found it funny how the beginning of the episode, when Daemon kind of comes in on the dragon, and he's like, I'm basically there to take charge. And before that, the guy that was being fed upon with the crabs had his he was basically being tortured, and he's kind of like, oh yeah, he's finally here to save me, or is it Prince Daemon, my prince? Kind of gonna say, and he just kind of steps on him. I felt like that was a little bit of a what do you call it? That was a little bit of a funny thing. I think of that was just funny because I could see them kind of doing that in the comedy thing, like Family Guy, or one of those adult comedies, or it's like Simpsons, or like just something hilarious, like, oh, he's finally gonna save me, and just kind of like steps on him. But yeah, so as the synopsis or the premise basically kind of entails, like, this episode involving the crab feeder and Daemon, it definitely involves them. But when we shift back to unlike from the previous episode, we actually saw that was happening for a while. And like the previous episode before, though, we see or saw essentially that they were having a problem with the crab feeder. But the thing is that I noticed about this episode is that there's a time shift. There's a fast forward of certain things, as a fast forward of certain events that have basically transpired now, and the rules I feel like have shifted. Things are different now. Things have shifted, and brings about a bit of concern to Rhaenyra's standing, the standing of the king, his judgments, and etc. And I think this is all about the king making wondering if he made the right choice. Because in this fast forward now that we've moved a little bit ahead, the king has a son now, and his son is has blonde hair, all cute and all this other things, and as in Allison's child, like how we revealed in the last episode that he would be essentially taking her hand in marriage, and is his firstborn child. Now it brings into the question of, but what about Rhaenyra? What's about Rhaenyra? And again, like, so I kind of talked about before, the family politics of kingship, the family politics of royalty, of who will be king, who deserves to be king, and who is the rightful heir to the throne. And even it's funny because even in this episode we kind of see Viserys himself kind of get frustrated with the whole, everybody wants to know what's the deal now, now that we have a boy. Do you know what I mean? Now that we have a boy and not necessarily Rhaenyra, even though we pledged fealty to Rhaenyra, that was when there was no man to succeed the throne. But now that we have Rhaenyra, now that we have the boy, and we have Aegon, born to Alicent and the king, is he gonna be king now? Should he be king now? You know what I mean? That's the whole contentious thing of it. And clearly a lot of the characters within this feel like, for that time, just because he's a male born to the king, that he probably should be preferenced over that of Rhaenyra, even though it was basically promised to essentially Rhaenyra. Something interesting we also see in this episode too, like I hinted at like last time, was that the fragile breakdown of Rhaenyra and Alicent. And I mean, honestly, it's pretty much what you expected, or it's pretty much what you expect from or to come about from basically, best friends fucking one of your parents. Essentially, and having their kids, it's like, what the fuck, man? Like, you know what I mean? Like, just the straight up disrespect. But I mean, I understand also, like, for Alicent, if you think about it from her perspective, it wasn't necessarily her fault, I want to say, or her, but she had I want to believe that she definitely had she's been, I don't know. In terms of like casting blame, I don't know if we should say that Alicent is really at fault. I mean, I kind of, I don't know. I maybe, because we know what happens, this is on review. Maybe some of the decisions that she makes in the later episodes within this, definitely she takes responsibility for. But realistically, I mean, I feel like she's just a pawn in all this. Realistically, she's been a pawn on all this, from her father basically pimping her out and deciding like, oh, you know what, you shall bang the king and have my grandchildren of royalty so I could come closer to the crown myself. Essentially, the game, right? The game is the game. So from then she was being manipulated, but I guess at the same time she could have had a say and she could try to stand up for her father, but like, what a lot of rights did she really have as a woman living in that time, being governed by her father? You know what I mean? Like, what rights has she really had to say what, her father, what was correct and what wasn't correct? So says her father, because back then, all like, the men had a lot of pull back then, which is, again, showing the struggles of the definitely females in this. But they see she just has a little bit more attitude. Rhaenyra has a little bit more attitude towards Alicent because of banging her dad. I mean, like, although, yeah, like I said, like, although she might not have had choice in it, I mean, it's going to be an uncomfortable situation either way you look at it, right? And now Rhaenyra, obviously feels like this is the basic episode that episode was about. She feels out. She feels like she's being pushed out of the family, or being pushed out of the succession, if you will. Because Aegon is born, and because this new family is considered the new royal family. And I'm sure out there, all of us has definitely felt this one time or another, where we felt out of place or not necessarily belong. But it's especially awkward when you're like with family. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's got to be like especially awkward, because I've definitely been there, where I've been like a part of like a family outing, but you don't really like fit in. Like how should I put it? Like, I don't know, if your family is estranged, that's probably a good like, if you ever have like a strange family, or like long distance cousins who live like far away, and then like you see them every once in a while, and then you try to hang out with them, but like you're still kind of like sort of like strangers with your family. I can only imagine that's how Rhaenyra feels, and I think that they've definitely done a good job of capturing that within this. But yeah, so this episode, they go into it's all about hunting, right? And they go into this hunt, and I thought it was actually kind of cool how like we saw a different perspective of like some activities that almost like relaxing leisurely activities that these rich rich people of royalty back in the day probably partake in like hunting. Like they were looking for a white, from what I understand, I want to say it was like a white elk or a white deer kind of thing. And just the way that they did it, it was more like glamping, not like camping. Like, yeah, I mean, like they went out to these tents, but like inside the tents looked like super fucking fancy. Like that's what I wanted to say the equivalent of essentially what this was like, what this was. But yeah, it just showed from a different perspective. Because I don't think we ever got anything like that in like Game of Thrones. No, I don't think. Thinking back, no. Like, I mean, well, we did have a scene actually, like in the early Game of Thrones, where it was like Robert Baratheon was like hunting, and apparently even like in that hunting episodes, like when Ned Stark, we were introduced to him. He had a hunting accident, and like that's how he kind of like died and lost the throne. I kind of like I started to think a little bit about that when we were introduced to this whole hunting environment and exposition of within this episode. And of course, like Rhaenyra again, just showing that she is a very diverse and like kind of tomboyish different character. Definitely goes off, and we see we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we see the things that she does when it comes to hunting, and they definitely paint the picture of outcasts essentially towards her, and like in the outcasts, and they actually show the contrast of how different and how much of how estranged she is to, even though being within this world, she is estranged to the whole dynamics of the fact that she's being ostracized right now. Because if you look at it, like we kind of sense it, like they paint this picture very well of like her being an outcast and her being very not a part of, like she's there but she's not basically a part of the hunting activity. Because look at it, she goes off on her own. All of the women inside of the camp, usually what do? They paint the picture of the women. They stay in and they in the tents while the men go out and hunt and do all these other things. And Rhaenyra instead, throughout this episode, she's the one that actually goes off and she actually has interactions with animals and stuff. It shows how different she is from what is expected of a lady of that time, I suppose. So I want to talk about some characters that we actually meet in this episode too. We got a chance to meet the guy with the clumped foot. I'm not remembering his name right now, but the guy with the clumped foot, he definitely becomes more significant and more weird with the later episodes for sure. But he was the one. He's you also see him gathering amongst the women as they prepare for the hunt, or everybody else goes off the hunt. And he says a line like he's not much one for hunting, given his condition of being basically like having basically this disability. And it's like when we first watched it on the first watch, I kind of knew, even from like on the outskirts, when they did a open shot of like him walking around as like I think they entered the hunting grounds. And I was like, that character, because he reminds me of Bran, the guy who had the visions in the first one. He reminded me of Bran. I was like, that guy's gonna be significant. I saw that. I was like, somehow I feel like that guy's gonna play some kind of significance within the story. And definitely right, but more about that later, essentially. Throughout this, we meet actually a Lannister from the old Game of Thrones too. I thought that was actually really cool. So the Lannister that we meet, essentially, is Jason Lannister. And essentially what happens is that, like, Jason starts hitting on Rhaenyra, and she's polite about it. And she's like, "Well, thank you," blah blah blah. And she kind of like fucks off to her tent to the main tent to ask her dad, like, well, what the fuck? Like, you set me up with this guy just to marry me off. And again, breaking away from tradition. We see how like kind of like a unique character like she kind of is, breaking away or attempting to break away from tradition to the point of being basically insulted that she is seen or felt like just some chip or piece to be bargained with. Essentially, the succession or the promise towards her kingship or her rule wasn't, or queenship, I guess, wasn't really necessarily a serious proposal set out by Viserys, and that's how she probably feels right now, which is, I mean, like, understandable. Like, realistically, like, it's because Aegon is born, and she feels like some kind of just like bargaining chip, and not necessarily like, like her. And what it comes down to, she doesn't feel like his daughter. Realistically, that's what I see. His daughter, who is to claim the throne successfully. And so she runs off into the woods, and the knight Sir Christian Cole goes running after her. And even on the first watch of it, I kind of saw, and I think everybody else kind of saw, like, they go fuck. Yeah, they go fuck. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel as though, like, I wasn't the only one there. Guys, let me know in the comments what you think. If you think that, like, when you first saw this, like, pretty boy, oh, look at my hair, like, I'm a knight, and I'm gonna, like, make sure that the princess is literally a knight in shining armor for the princess. Like, they go fuck. Like, really? This is Game of Thrones. Like, George R. R. Martin knows exactly what he's doing. And, like, we all kind of saw it. We all kind of saw it coming, and we get the vibe that there's something definitely there, but more on that later. So Christian Cole and Rhaenyra essentially have this moment of, walking about in the woods, and this bonding moment for sure. And this basically, I feel like it basically, like I was saying before, it's just to show her ostracized from the actual family. And then they even talk about it a little bit too, with when they were in that carriage earlier too, and they were kind of like, and later in the episode too, they kind of like, oh, you will have a family of your own one day, and you'll understand exactly what it means to sacrifice, and et cetera, and all this other stuff. And yeah, and it essentially, we could see the divide happening, right? It literally within the royal family of Rhaenyra going off on her own, doing her own thing, and the king Viserys is starting to rebuild his country. And they started to talk as they're separated. They're A family, they're the divided family. Rhaenyra is on her own, and Viserys is with the king, and Alicent, they're trying to hunt. And they're, like I was talking about before, they're trying to hunt this white deer-looking thing. I forget what they call a white mountain or whatever it's called. And Alicent's father says something to the extent of, he says that, hey, like, it'd be a good day for us to actually, catch and kill this thing, because it's supposed to be a sign from the gods to say that, ruling, a sign from the god that the person that's ruling the kingdom, or who is to rule the kingdom, is blessed, or is basically a blessing upon them to rule the kingdom. And like I said, throughout this, Viserys the king has like doubts about essentially Rhaenyra, because he has Aegon now, and he has Aegon's heir as an heir, and that comment basically, you can see that we can see when his face, if you look back, it kind of like he's kind of like, yeah, sure, like, but he kind of also has like second thoughts about that, essentially, because everybody is assuming, even Jason Lannister, who he tried to gift with a spear, he was saying that everyone had assumed that, because Aegon now is here, that, you know, he's going to usurp the crown from Rhaenyra, and he's the rightful heir because he's a man. He's a child, but because he's a child boy, he's a male, and he always had male rulers, and now actually have a female ruler, necessarily of royalty, not necessarily connected to any male, is something unheard of. And to the fact that Viserys actually takes it as an insult, that he would even suggest such a thing, that things would be changing in the royal family now, but just because Aegon is born. But Viserys kind of like doubles down. He kind of like backs up his claim of like, look, like, I chose Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is gonna be it. And if you guys don't want to get on board with it, then I mean, hey, like, honestly, like, I don't know what to tell you, but it is what it is, and I am the king. But it definitely, I can tell it definitely him saying that definitely planted some seeds of like doubt within him. It's like, did I make the right choice? Should I have waited a while longer before actually naming her, or etc. But yeah. And much like the game being played, I guess everybody is more or less concerned about the state of, basically, I guess, Rhaenyra, if you think about it. Because even Alicent's grandfather, and he talks to Alicent about it even more later on in the in private in their chambers, of this potential conflict of Rhaenyra assuming that she is still going to be in charge despite Aegon's birth, Alicent's son. And he comes up with the suggestion of that, hey, what if we just like try to marry her off to Laenor, the same guy who was trying to marry off the brother of the little girl he was going to see if he was going to marry in the previous episode, so that they would still be connected to the Valyrian family in that way. And that's what he was essentially attempting to do. Now, the thing is, he's still scheming. He's still scheming, and like, to the point of where, like, I think like Viserys kind of like, he doesn't break character, but he kind of starts talking for us as like, he starts talking to us as like the audience. He's kind of like, he's like, okay, like, he's like, he says something, he becomes basically insulted by this, essentially saying that, oh, you're trying to marry her off too, or whatever, or I'm sure that this like essentially gains power for you. And he says that with the other guy, that the chubbier guy too. And it's like, it's kind of like, again, like, he starts to speak for us. It's kind of like, well, like, when is this bullshit gonna basically stop? Like, it's always about trades and deals and who can get more power, or who's vouching for more power, or essentially attempting to who is essentially trying to get to the top. And it's like he's been drinking a little bit. He's been drinking back the wine for a little bit, but he has a point, like, because I guess, like, again, like, he kind of speaks for us as like fans, like, yes, that's what Game of Thrones is about being sneaking and conniving and plotting and all these wicked things that just to attain these crowns, and just to get these crowns. But you know, I mean, honestly, like, some of that stuff gets old at some point. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this one's trying to attempt to do this one, just to do this one. He's just like, I feel like at that point when he's talking and he made that comment, he's kind of like, all right, cut the bullshit. Like, what do you want? Like, what are you trying to essentially get at? And that's the whole reason. I think he got that way because his kid was kind of telling him that at the same time too. It's like, she feels just like a bargaining chip. It was kind of like, well, like, why is it that, like, she can't be happy, make her own decisions, and do her own thing? And he fights with her, basically saying it's for the crown. But I feel like in that moment when he got drunk, he was kind of like, you know, I'm just tired of this whole fucking, everybody's trying to look out for themselves, manipulate and scheme and all this other bullshit, essentially. But yeah, and it's heavy as the head that wears the crown. That's all I gotta say. Because I can only imagine, like, or if you can imagine, like, if you were a king and all this constant bullshit was happening, it's almost like, I'm not saying Joffrey was like right. Whoa there, calm down, guys. I'm not saying Joffrey was right, but I mean, Joffrey in the original Game of Thrones, Joffrey was being manipulated and being leaded and guided somewhat by Cersei in those early episodes, but eventually he broke away from her and started doing his own thing. But at this, and then he got poisoned. Well, spoilers alert, it's been some kind of time now, but he got his comeuppance because he was being an asshole. But at the same time, no one was really trying to, like, come to him and be like, oh, you know, if you do this, do that, then maybe if you do this, if you did that, well, we could try to do this and we could try to do that. You know what I mean? Like, no one was really trying to no one, but seriously, in the beginning, like I said, was really trying to manipulate him because he was just a terrifying little fucker, little dick of a fucker. Like, you know what I mean? He was just a horrible human being. But I mean, I'm not saying that that's the way to rule, but I'm just saying that it's something that I noticed. I definitely noticed. But Viserys is actually a man. He's a human being. He's a person. He's not a child. He actually wants to hear out and listen to the council and actually wonder what his council had to say. And that's a contrast between a man leader and just a child who just does who has chaotic energy. But I mean, that's it. Also comes with the burden of having to listen to everyone. It comes with the burden of having to listen to everyone and having to consider certain avenues and certain things as opposed to, like, just doing whatever you want, causing a bunch of fucking chaos. That's all I was trying to say, really. So back to Rhaenyra and Sir Christian Cole. They're in the woods and they find this boar, actually, that Rhaenyra halfway kills. Sir Christian Cole kind of kills, and, like, Rhaenyra basically finishes it off to a violent degree where there's basically blood on her face. And that, I think, to me, or to the audience, essentially shows that, again, she's very different. I think that they were just trying to paint this or George R.R. Martin, whoever wrote the script, laid this out, was essentially trying to communicate to us that she is different. She will kill. She will go to that extent. As opposed to other women like Alicent and the women who are back there at the hunting grounds, they wouldn't get their hands dirty. They wouldn't be in the muck and the guck. She's a little bit of a tomboy. right? Rhaenyra is a little bit more of a tomboy than Alicent is, and that's again showing the divide, showing the contrast of the women, the two sides of this kind of like females, I guess I want to say right at this point, and Viserys's life. Yeah, so they find this boar and she murders it undeniably. Like she goes into beast mode and just takes out a knife. But Sir Criston Cole helped her a little bit, but because it was on top of her and it was kind of like attacking her. But then she comes in and she lands like the final blow for essentially she takes the kill. She takes the kill away from Sir Criston Cole. Not from him, but like she has the final blow from the beast. Cut back to Viserys, and Viserys is kind of like I said, like before, he was having doubts about his succession, and the reason that he was saying this was because of another dream that he had about how he had a son and he would be king and he would have royalty status and etc. and etc. Now, a little bit of a tangent here. Dreams. I want to talk about dreams real quick. I think dreams in general, not just for kings or fictional characters, I think dreams in general speak to us. Comment below, guys, or comment. Let me know in the comments how you feel about dreams in general, how you feel about dream characters and dreaming, and how what they basically. I mean, I feel like in this story, definitely it basically painted the picture of either both foreshadowing, as well as like what this character is essentially feeling and going through, and what decisions he decides to make. But I feel, right, dreams in general, right, are pretty. Dreams in general can be pretty intuitive as to like how you're feeling, in my opinion. I think they speak to us. But sometimes they can give us a bit of insight into or intuition towards a future or a possible future. Do you know what I mean? Like, let me know in the comments if you ever felt this way or if you ever had this happen to you before, where you're kind of like, you've had a dream, you're like, this is speaking to me. This is speaking to me, and I mean like you fall asleep, not like a dream. Oh, I had a dream one day. No, you fell asleep, and you had these images in your brain that showed you pictures that entertained you while you slept, and you essentially had it connected with you. You had a connection. It connected with you on a level that's. It was trying to speak to you or tell you something of the future, tuition. And I believe that this has happened to me before, and it's kind of scary, but also somewhat enlightening to a certain degree. I mean, I've had some pretty fucked up dreams before, but I mean, I think dreams basically speak to us on a subconscious level, because that's essentially what it is. But it speaks to us on a spiritual level as well, of how a possible future could possibly go. And let me know if you guys agree with that or not. Because I want to real quick reference. We're talking about all this like Game of Thrones, medieval century kind of like lore and etc. etc. This, I feel like this whole story, and when I was even first introduced to Game of Thrones, before it even came out, I remember that when we did in high school, we did like the story Macbeth, and it's reminded me a lot of like, especially like this situation, how it reminded me a lot of like Macbeth and how he was shown the future, but because of this future that he was shown, he started to make these crazy, ridiculous, nightmarish decisions that impacted people that ultimately caused his demise. That's essentially how the Macbeth story goes. Go ahead and read Macbeth, guys, if you are at all curious about that story too. It's actually pretty good. It's also kind of like made in medieval times. We watched a really, really old version video of it in high school. And it's pretty entertaining. But it's pretty entertaining, and the story is not quite. This definitely isn't quite the story of Macbeth, but the situation I feel like really relates hard to what the series is going through. Because in Macbeth, like I said, he was shown the future. He made some really rational decisions that led to his demise anyway. And he not the necessary. If he had been shown that, the question comes like, if he hadn't been shown that, would he still made those decisions, those crazy decisions? And Viserys starts to talk about how he saw in his dream a future where Aegon was king, a boy king. And it was so vivid, it was so clear, and like he would have a son that would be king. And he's questioning his direction and decisions he's been made since, and he's been criticizing his own decisions based on that dream that he essentially did. And it's kind of significant because, like, again, maybe had he not known about that dreams, or had he not been shown that potential future, would he still have named Rhaenyra as succession? Would he still have been wavering or having these doubts about naming Rhaenyra as a succession? And that's essentially what he tries to communicate within that scene of the fire when him and Alicent was in front of it. So something else, going back to the hunting, something else that actually I think kind of showed us a little bit of foreshadowing by the writers and the whole Game of Thrones world of House of the Dragon. So going back to the white deer elk thing, that whatever it is that they were hunting, they go on the hunt and they find and they capture this elk. I'm gonna call it a deer. No, I'm not gonna call it a deer. They find this deer, but it's not the white one that they were essentially hoping to get. That basically brings good fortune and fortitude to its killer or captures or whatever. It wasn't the rare one that they were looking for. It didn't show a pair to him, but it was one that it was one that they found, and they invited the king to that they found and captured, and they invited the king to essentially murder this creature. And so given what we've heard about how it's just like, again, signs and things talking to you, right? This spoke to me as like how he even was apprehensively, he went up to like try to kill this thing. This kind of he wanted a white one, by the way, and the white one would have brought good fortune. But the brown one that he had found, the normal or the common one that he had found, it brings to the question, like, does it mean that he's gonna have misfortune now, or does it mean that he made the wrong choice, or does it mean that the choices that he's making or he's thinking about is incorrect? It further solidifies and sows his doubt, I think, and he thrusts the spear into the beast, and the beast takes the blow of it, but it doesn't go down, it doesn't die. So the first attempt, it didn't go down again, but the king doesn't he gets a little bit more confident, and one of his helpers like, no, sir, you gotta aim here to actually take down and kill the beast. And on this second attempt, he kills the animal and it goes down. He kills the deer and it goes down. And I don't know, that scene, I think it's slight, it's subtle, but that kind of spoke. I think they were just trying to communicate something there that I think to him as the character, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And it just basically said that, hey, maybe Aegon is the right choice. The first choice being Rhaenyra, and then the second choice being Aegon, because Aegon came along later. Maybe the second choice is the one that he should essentially do, because in the second blow, he was able to take down the dare, right? Rather than the first one. But also, I mean, overall, just speaking in a metaphorical term, this wasn't even the right dare that he wanted to kill. This isn't the right one that he wanted to kill. It isn't the right one that he wanted to hunt. So, I mean, at the end of it all, I think, I don't know, I think it just kind of speaks to some kind of tragedy that this isn't blessed. That this overall, the succession of Aegon being king isn't blessed, isn't just, isn't or his ideas of that isn't correct. And we cut back to Rhaenyra's, Rhaenyra's having a long adventure with her sister Kristen Cole, and she's doing her own thing. She's essentially on her own, looking into the distance of the camp of where they were essentially staying. And what appears in front of her is actually the white deer that everybody wanted, that was that basically showed a blessing, I guess maybe from the gods or from their gods, that hey, like the rightful heir or the rightful throne is with you, or should be able to sit with you. And Kristen Cole goes to like murder this thing. She's like, no. She's like, no. Because she just wanted to admire the beauty and the life that is precious within that rare wildlife. And I thought two things. One, them damn dares didn't need to die. that dare didn't need to die. It basically showed her humility and the kind of ruler that she would be, that she would rule with. She would be, and also, yeah, I guess her killing the boar, but leaving the beautiful wildlife that wasn't actually attacking her, because the dare just kind of came up to her and presented herself to her, and she had the opportunity to murder it and bring it back home, but she chose not to. And that actually showed restraint, but it also showed a strength of force when she was essentially attacked and the boar came after her, because the boar actually instigated the attack, right? And that's when she actually fought back and murdered the boar and brought the boar back home. But she let the dare live. So that actually kind of showed that, like, the kind of rulish that she would be, but also that she's deserving of. It showed that she values life, and she would value life overall, if not being aggressed upon. But if there's an aggressor, she would actually take him out. So I think that kind of just spoke, that whole overall scene essentially spoke to me, and that it was supposed to speak to the audience on that kind of level. And I didn't get it on the first take. I'll give you that. I'll give House of the Dragon that. I did not quite understand that metaphor on the first take. And this is why we do on review, because like at first I just thought it was like, okay, this is just some deer, and they're hunting it. But I only kind of got on the first take was that, like, this is gonna be this. What I only got on the first take was that the dare presenting herself to her was that, like, she's the rightful heir to the throne. But I didn't contrast it with the boar and things that she's willing to do to protect herself and fight, and the people that she had around her to protect herself. Essentially, I didn't see that, and I didn't see the kind of ruler that she would be. I kind of got that now because of we were talking about earlier about Joffrey and how kind of ruler she is, and that the demonstrative things that she's done, and the characteristic of Rhaenyra. So cutting back to Alicent and her father, and she's like I was talking about earlier. They were talking about how Aegon should essentially usurp the throne. He should be next in line to become king. The thing is, Alicent at this point, it seems like Alicent doesn't, being a pawn and all this, which is so sad. She doesn't care which way or the other it essentially goes. Really, that's how it seems anyway. But her father is still being manipulative and and pawning her essentially into trying to get his wishes done and trying to get him to trying to get her to convince him to be to make Aegon the succession or the successor rather than that of Rhaenyra. But that isn't even what happens. What they start talking about is the stepstones and how Daemon is essentially faring in the stepstones. And I'm not gonna lie, this next half, and essentially that was originally like a good chunk of the episode right there we talked about so far. But the next half of this episode, which is like the last little bit of this episode, the rest of the episode is fucking awesome. Actually, it's pretty fucking cool. So essentially, what happens is, instead of convincing the king to deal with anything with Aegon and Rhaenyra and who gets the throne next and blah, 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 all this drama, blah, 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 shit. Instead of doing any of that, she reads this letter from the place where the Daemon is at and fighting the sea snake, with the sea snake and fighting the crab feeder and all that other stuff, and about helping, essentially. And Alicent, still having some goodness in her, is like kind of like, they should help. They're asking for help. You should help. They're asking for help. And the king kind of fights her on it, and she's kind of like, well, what how is it good for the kingdom if they lose? How's it gonna look if they lose? Do you know what I mean? And so she convinces the king to present aid. And when Daemon gets the letter about this shit, essentially, about hearing this, I mean, my man goes off. My man goes off on the messenger. Just talk about don't kill the messenger, but he fucking goes off on this guy. I thought he was gonna kill him actually after he finished reading it. Real quick though, I want to just go back to the relationship between Rhaenyra and her father. So after the whole hunt, Rhaenyra basically explains like how she's being offended that you would just offer her up as some kind of princess trophy thing, as a thing rather than a person to the Lannisters essentially. And that's what she was essentially being offended by. But Viserys is trying to get her to understand that you need to stake a claim, you need to have a family, you need to start building a family of your own, but he doesn't really seek to replace her as next in line to succeed him. And it's kind of somewhat of a touching moment because they fight and it's essentially Rhaenyra throws in his face essentially that you would remarry that child. You would marry that child from the previous episode, that just to gain more power. And it's all about power and manipulative and playing the Game of Thrones, right? But it's a bit of a touching moment when like Viserys, the king, basically slows down a bit and he's like, okay, all right, like let's just stop wilding out for a bit. You need to build this family. I'm worried about you. You need protection and fortification, essentially. He communicates this to her. And he's like, if you want to choose him yourself, choose him. I'm not going to force you. Because he could force her, right? Because he's the king. That'd be some dickish, like, Joffrey shit. But he could force her. But he's like, you know what? Like, listen, like, let's get this done. I want you to have a family. I want you to be happy, want you to be content. So you choose him. You choose who he wants you to be. It's a very touching thing, like I said, like, and he tells her like he would never, I still feel the same. I would never usurp you. I would never change my mind about having you succeed the throne. And as she leaves the room, it's touching. I was kind of even like, oh, come on, give your father a hug. But being the softie that I am, I was like, give your father a hug. I was like, no. I was no, okay. But as she leaves the room, the camera kind of pans on him a little bit, and you can still see the seeds of doubt that has been within him through this entire adventure. Because I think, again, the experience with the dare that he had is a sign of getting some kind of signs that things are essentially supposed to be this way, or are not supposed to be this way. But yeah, so let's talk about back at the stepstones of Daemon fighting the crab feeder. We're gonna and just like how I was saying before, he goes off on the messenger, and don't kill the messenger. Daemon wanted to kill the messenger. After he goes off on him, we just see the letter. We actually hear the letter being read about how the king plans to send ships and men to essentially help Daemon out on this venture. And I personally think that Daemon was so insulted by this. That's why he went off. He was like, I fucking need help from my fucking brother. Like, I don't need any help. It's like his honor and his pride was damaged. So damaged. He was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, I'm doing this by myself. I'm going off. I can handle this on my own. I don't need his help. I don't want his help. And I resonated with that energy. And I resonated with that energy. I was like, you know what? Fuck yeah. Yeah, fuck yeah. And even though I'd seen it before, and I know some badass shit was about to happen, I was like, yes. I was all about that energy. I was like, yes, take it on your own, do it on your own. You got this, bro. And again, I can't quite remember what happened, but essentially what did happen was Daemon, they were talking about earlier, who would go into and lead and bring out the crab feeder from the caves, because that's where they were hiding essentially. The entire army of them was hiding in the caves, and they don't know the caves, right? So if they were to go inside of the caves, that might have been their slaughter. So the strategy was to have someone coax them and bring them out from hiding. And Daemon goes in there, he's waving the white flag, and the crab feeder is looking for the dragons. He's all wondering where everybody is. So he calls a few men out to basically to capture Daemon, but it's all a ploy. It's all a ploy to essentially bring them in closer. And Daemon goes off. I'm not gonna lie. I remember the scene vaguely, but like, this motherfucker goes off. He turns into a fucking anime character. I don't know what happens. I don't know what happened there before. I don't know what happened when he was jousting. I think we saw him do some physical stuff when he was jousting, but like he goes off. He starts slicing mofos. Like he just goes off, dude. And it's an impactful scene. It's jam-packed full of energy. He's slicing dudes, he's dodging arrows, he's taking hits, but like the hits ain't bothering him. He's taking cover under this cabana thing, and again, like very much anime fashion, the situation looks like hopeless, and the crab feeder is still looking in the sky for this dragon. And I'm wondering, like, even like on the first watch, I was like, well, where's this dragon coming? And I knew the dragon was coming, the flames were coming. I was just like, in that moment, I couldn't help but think, like, this motherfucker's a warrior. This motherfucker's a knight. Like, he's an actual warrior. This dude is like killing it, and he's gonna take on this entire army by himself. And he starts to become surrounded, and they start to swarm him. And like right at the moment of impact, like we get that flame of the dragons, one of his dragons, and that basically burns away a good chunk of the army. And then his backup arrives of his the other guys that was with him earlier of his army, a small little army, that the Valyrian army that they had brought with them. So he brings them out of hiding, and they surround him. His backup comes, and he's just about to fight, and the flame comes, and they all get burned. And that was just so. And who do you see riding it? It's Laenor, right? The guys, his brother, the girl who the king was gonna marry, his brother, and he's riding on Dragonback. Because you kind of forget that they can ride dragons too, because they're technically they have Targaryen blood as well. And this dragon is tearing shit up and burning stuff. Because you would expect Daemon to be riding the dragon, because he's the Targaryen who is a part of who's close to the royal family. But to actually see someone else do it was just a bit of a surprise. I gotta admit, to me, on the first and the second watch, I forget who was actually riding the dragon. But yeah, so the dragons come and save them along with the backup, and then they lure them out of the stepstones. And the king crab, the leader of the crab feeder, the leader of these guys, the crab feeder, walks back into the caves. But Daemon chases after him, not knowing what the fuck is gonna happen. But essentially, what happens is it didn't take too long within the battle. This gruesome, very bloody, fire-indulging battle. Medieval battle. We've all seen Game of Thrones war before, but this great bloody medieval war. It doesn't take long for Daemon to basically essentially step out with half of the crab feeder's body. Basically, well, it was more like a quarter of it, but it was the upper half of his torso. He drags him out, and he's like, it basically is showing again. At that moment, I felt pride for him. I was like, didn't need your brother's help. Way to go. Did it on your own. Fucking way to fucking go. That's it. That's man. I love that the energy of just you can do it on your own. You know what I mean? You can do it on your own. You can be independent. You don't have to do it just because your brother is king. You're just you're not any less than your brother. And so he murders the crab feeder, and he takes his win, essentially, and the episode ends. And yeah, that's essentially what episode 3 was essentially about. And this episode was actually, it was better. I think this episode was actually pretty good. Honestly, because that ending, and I'll admit that ending definitely saved it. That jam-packed action stuff, what was essentially happening, it definitely boosted the tone of what the whole Game of Thrones franchise is essentially about for me. And there was some deep stuff that was essentially happening that spoke to me metaphorically. But yeah, and in this time in the segment, we're going to talk about Ash's favorite scenes. Yeah, you guys ready? You guys ready for Ash's favorite scenes? We're going to do it. Let's do it. All right, Ash's favorite scenes. Scene coming in at scene number 3. Honestly, I gotta admit the whole scene with the whole scene with the fire, I guess I want to say, and Viserys. The whole scene with Viserys and the fire essentially which essentially spoke to him, which gave him how he explained to us, because it's not the first time. I think it's one of my favorite things, because it's not the first time that he talked about how his dreams or prophecies or dreams essentially talk to him. The Song of Ice and Fire, it's essentially Game of Thrones, the ending, if you saw it, what happens with the White Walkers and all that stuff. He saw it in a vision, and that came to pass. He saw this in a vision as well, where one of his sons would become king. And he, again, the contrast of this and Macbeth is kind of speaks to anybody that's seen any kind of like tragedy in terms of like I said, like Macbeth or any kind of tragedy in terms of like Shakespeare, even like Romeo and Juliet. So that very throwback to that, I feel like, is why this is what it's third to one of my favorite scenes. Essentially the signs that spoke to, because it bolstered the other scene of him killing the dare that wasn't the white dare that he wanted to essentially murder. Second favorite scene is Rhaenyra and her attempts to her attempts to go off to, and when she murdered that boar. Like I said, that solidified the kind of ruler that she would be, because it also was supported by the scene of that she is blessed, seen as the next ruler, because the white deer presented itself to her, as well as it showed the kind of ruler she would be. If she's aggressed upon, if she's attacked, then she will attack. But if there's no threat, like the white deer didn't give her any threat, then there's not going to be any reason for cause. There's not going to be any reasons for the attack, to attack. So it just kind of bolstered and showed her kind of character. And lastly, the number one scene definitely for this episode has got to be the battle with Daemon going in this against basically an army. This anime moment of him getting shot up with arrows, running through and just cutting down people, and then just being saved at the last minute. Like, that was just like, that sequence was just pretty neat. I gotta admit, that scene was just pretty good, honestly. We are good. And just like every other episode, guys, we're gonna get the on review score from our lovely host, Linda. Linda, score. Go ahead and give us the score.
House of the Dragon Episode 3 receives a 4 out of 5.
Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for me. I'm out of time. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate it if you listened all the way to the end. You guys rock. Again, thank you so much for listening. Remember to follow us on all of our socials, for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all of those things. And thank you again to all the shout outs and all of the communities that actually gets involved with OnReviewCast. You guys are awesome too. And lastly, guys, just before I go, don't forget, be safe, be kind, be you. Take care.